B8.5S4, do you have a response on no two engines are the same aside from the R&D for the tunes, but for people that is very far outside of where you actually tested the tunes, the broad spectrum of weather, etc. Not a hateful comment at all. I'm curious on your response to canned versus custom for your specific engine. All right, let me just do it quick and then Nate can add to it. No two engines are the same. True. Definitely no two engines are the same. No two snowflakes are the same, and snowflakes are quite simple compared to engines. So every engine runs a little bit different. It runs some amount differently. The compression ratio is some amount different. The injectors inject some different amount of fuel. There is variability in every factor, in every component of every engine. It so happens that no two ECU calibration outcomes are the same either, right? So because engines are different, ECUs are adaptable. So this is where kind of this idea of custom tuning falls apart. The ECU is not a static device. The ECU does not give the same amount of timing and fueling and knock correction to every motor. Okay, so because the ECU is adaptable within sufficient range to the variability of all engines, then we can offer an off-the-shelf calibration that does create optimal running performance and results, because the ECU is adapting to the unique performance and operating characteristics of every engine that is different. Yeah. So you don't need custom tuning because there's really no such thing. The ECU is the only thing that does the custom tuning. So as long as we put the ECU within the correct plausible range of all the operating conditions needed, then the ECU can do quite a bit with it.
Yeah, it's a really wide set of modeling parameters that come in for all these different elevation, temperatures, rate of change, this, that, everything. When you put it, aftermarket flywheels or whatever example you want to throw at it, ideally all of that stuff is captured as much as possible within the log. I mean, my biggest gripe with custom tuning on I think any of these platforms in the VAG world, at least, is that the amount of R&D required to know what to tune and how to tune it is, the barrier to entry is incredibly high. You can turn knobs all day and get some sort of result on the other side, but to know what you're adjusting, why you're calibrating it, how it will work at various conditions, what, the ramifications are, where the limits are. There's a lot of things in these ECUs that are not in the calibration. You could never custom tune out some of these problems. You have to get into the firmware and fix some problems in the firmware and get around it that way. And, those are just things that you're never going to get from a generic custom tune.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw out a little analogy no analogy is perfect, but this is like saying, Nate and I are different people and we have different health needs and requirements. So because of that, we both cannot use the same doctor. We each have to have our own doctor who's custom tailored to each of our health. Yeah. And that's just not true, right? So if I go to the doctor and the doctor says, hey, you have this certain condition, there's 3 different medications you could take, tell me about yourself, and oh, you're allergic to this one. So he would give me one medication. He could treat Nate with the same condition using a different medication that's better suited to Nate. The ECU is the same way. The same ECU doesn't treat every motor the same. In fact, you could I think I've discussed this before, you could buy a B9 Audi S4 and you could log it with the engine that's in the car, and then you could take that engine out and put a different engine in, and then you could run it and log it. And those two logs would have some similarities, but they'd
be very similar, but they're not going to be bit for bit overlapping.
No, they would be customized for not only the operating conditions or operating peculiarities of each engine, but also for the fact that the air is different, from this time to that time. The environment is changing, the temperature, the air, the humidity, the elevation. The ECU is adjusting for all that stuff. So, custom tune doesn't help you do any of those things better. Yeah, and to Nate's point, like, custom tune is probably going to be a small time guy, and
that's the majority
of who's not going to have put in the R&D.
The questions when it comes up around custom tuning is, XYZ shop is able to flash these ECUs because some tools let them do that. So now they're a custom tuner, and they you know have to be a specialist in whatever cars they cover, and it's usually an endless list of makes and models out there. So obviously they can't put the R&D time in to just dig in and research and understand from the the software level up to the calibration what's going on in there, which we have to do because we run into these limits and we need to fix them correctly so that our tune works on thousands of cars, not a car that you found some half workaround that made it work okay on the dyno.
Yeah, so there's just there's just nothing about a custom tune that makes it inherently better than a production file that allows the ECU to adapt to all the variable conditions within the engine and outside of it.
Yeah, and obviously that's given within the parameters of the specified the tune, what hardware is it set up for, that kind of thing. If you just want to go throw some completely unsupported thing on and go do your own, forge your own path, yes, then
that's
you're
the basis of the
scope of it.
That's the basis of the calibration. It's and not to say that the ECU can adapt to a different turbo or different injectors, right? Those are the things that have to be programmed correctly.